A struggling single dad got a midnight call by mistake. But she said, "I needed you more than ever." The rain had come in sideways all evening, pounding the tin roof of the modest bungalow like an angry drummer. Liam Carter wiped his boots on the mat just inside the door and quietly locked it behind him. The clock above the mantel read 12:01 a.m. The living room was dim lit only by the soft glow of a vintage floor lamp and the flickering television screen now playing static. Emma had fallen asleep on the sofa, picture book still open in her lap, her cheeks flushed with sleep. He walked over, gently adjusted the blanket around her, and brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. She stirred, but didn't wake. Liam paused there for a moment, watching her. She was the reason he kept going, the reason he kept breathing. He'd worked a double shift patching an emergency boiler leak in a rundown apartment block where the heating had failed. His fingers were cracked and raw from the cold, the tips still stained with rust and sealant. But it wasn't the work that tired him. It was the silence. The silence that used to be filled with laughter, with her voice. He reached for his phone, which sat charging on the kitchen counter. One missed call from a number he didn't recognize. He frowned. Wrong number, maybe. Then it rang again. Liam stared at the screen. Unknown number. The digital clock on the microwave read 12:04 a.m. He hesitated. Every instinct told him to ignore it. Nothing good ever came from a midnight call. But something in the timing and the strange stillness of the room made his hand move. He answered. There was silence, and then a soft breath. Fragile. Unstable. A woman's voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to call. I know I shouldn't." Liam blinked, confused. "It's all right. Who is this?" Another pause. Her voice was trembling now, raw and full of something he hadn't heard in a long time, desperation. "I thought I dialed someone else. I just needed to hear someone's voice. I'm sorry." He could have ended it there. Could have said goodnight and hung up. But something in her tone caught him by the throat. A note of something brittle, like glass about to shatter. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She didn't answer, just let out a shaky breath. "I'm not okay," she whispered. "I'm not okay, and I don't know how to fix it anymore." Liam's breath caught. The room around him felt suddenly smaller. "You don't have to fix it all tonight," he said. "You just have to make it through tonight." There was silence, but she didn't hang up. "Where are you?" he asked. She gave a choked laugh. "I'm not going to jump off a building if that's what you're asking." He sat down at the kitchen table, his back aching. "That's not what I asked." She paused, and for the first time her voice steadied just barely. "I'm sitting in my car. I left a party. Everyone was laughing. I felt like I was watching strangers through glass. So I walked out." "You called the wrong number," he said quietly. Maybe she murmured. Or maybe I didn't. The rain continued tapping on the windows. Emma stirred again in her sleep, murmuring something inaudible. Liam glanced over and smiled, just barely. Then his attention returned to the line. "I don't know who you are," she continued, "but your voice, it's calm, like you're someone who's used to holding things together when they're falling apart." He let that hang there for a moment. Then he said softly, "I lost someone. A long time ago. I learned how to sound steady. Doesn't mean I am." There was a soft sound, something like a sob, trying to stay hidden. "I don't want to go home tonight," she whispered. "Everything there reminds me I'm not enough. That I failed." Liam leaned forward, resting his elbow on the table, eyes fixed on nothing. "Whoever told you that lied," he said. "How would you know? Because I've been there. And the truth is, the only people who say you're not enough are the ones who fear they never were." She didn't speak for a long moment. Then, quietly, "What's your name?" He hesitated. "Liam." Another pause. "I'm Sophie." They didn't say anything else for a while, just listened to the sound of each other's breathing. It was the kind of silence that didn't feel empty. It felt held. Eventually, she said, "Thank you, Liam, for answering." And then, without warning, the call disconnected. Liam stared at the phone. His own reflection blinked back at him in the dark screen. He sat there a long time. Then he rose, walked over to the sofa, and kissed Emma's forehead. "Good night, baby girl," he whispered. And in the quiet, where once there had been nothing, there was now a name. Sophie, and a voice he couldn't forget. Liam didn't sleep that night. He lay on the couch across from his daughter, staring at the ceiling as the old radiator hummed quietly in the background. Outside, the rain had turned to a light mist drifting through the porch light like breath on a winter window pane. Sophie. That was all he had. A name, a voice, and 1,000 silent questions. He didn't know what she looked like. Didn't know where she lived, what she did for a living, or what had driven her to make that call. But none of it mattered. What stayed with him wasn't the details. It was the weight in her voice, the ache buried in every syllable. He knew that ache. He'd carried it himself. By morning, Emma was back to her bright-eyed self. She bounced around the kitchen in her pajamas, requesting blueberry pancakes with exactly 3 chocolate chips per side, a Carter family tradition. Liam, bleary-eyed but smiling, obliged. "Did you dream last night?" she asked, climbing into the chair across from him. He poured the batter and glanced at her. "Yeah, I think I did." "What about a woman in the dark?" he said, then paused, and a voice I couldn't forget. Emma tilted her head in that curious way she did when she was trying to understand something beyond her years. "Did she say something scary?" Liam flipped a pancake, letting the thought hang in the air. "No," he said softly. "She said something honest." That evening, after Liam tucked Emma into bed and turned out the light, he sat on the porch with a cup of lukewarm coffee, listening to the quiet. The moon hung low, casting silver across the cracked pavement of the street below. The town was winding down, lights flicking off in windows, cars pulling into driveways. His phone buzzed just as he was about to set it down. Unknown number, 12:03 a.m. His heart thudded. For a moment he considered letting it go to voicemail, but he didn't. He swiped to answer. "Hello." There was silence, then a breath. "It's me again," she said, her voice low and cautious. "I know I shouldn't have called. I couldn't stop thinking about last night." He exhaled slowly. "Neither could I." A pause. Then, quieter, "I thought you wouldn't answer." "I wasn't sure I would," Liam admitted, "but I'm glad I did." She let out a small, almost nervous laugh. "Me too." This time she didn't sound quite so broken. Still brittle, still guarded, but not splintering. There was a sliver of something in her tone. Hope, maybe. Or gratitude. They talked for 20 minutes. Not about anything profound, just little things. Favorite foods, books they'd once loved, songs they secretly cried to in the car. She still didn't offer her last name, or where she lived. And Liam didn't ask. Her identity wasn't the point. It was the connection that mattered. Over the next week, the calls became routine. Always at 12:04. Always just her voice, and his. He came to expect it, like the way dawn eventually follows night. No texting, no social media, no pictures. Just real-time, honest conversations that existed nowhere but in the space between them. Some nights were quiet, their words as sparse as stars. Other nights she cried. And he listened. He never tried to fix her. That was the key. He never offered solutions or platitudes. He didn't ask her to cheer up or stay strong. He just gave her space. And in that space, she breathed. "I'm not used to this," she said one night. "Being heard." Liam was quiet. "You're not invisible. I feel it." "Well, you're not. Not to me." Silence. Then she asked softly, "Do you ever miss her?" It was the first time she brought up his pain. He didn't hesitate. "Every day." Sophie exhaled. How do you keep going? Liam looked at the stars overhead. I don't. Some days I stop. But then, Emma needs breakfast, or her shoelace breaks, or she wants to know why the moon follows our car. She laughed. Kids. Built-in purpose. Something like that. She was quiet for a long moment, then said almost like a prayer, I wish someone like you had answered my call a year ago. That same night, as Liam hung up and set the phone down, Gail, the elderly neighbor from next door, stepped out onto her porch wrapped in a thick robe and slippers. You're out late, she called. Liam smiled faintly. Couldn't sleep. She squinted. You've been smiling more lately. Less haunted. He blinked, surprised. Have I? Gail stepped down one step. Arms folded. Don't let it scare you. Healing can feel like betrayal when grief is all you've known. Liam's throat tightened. It's not like that. I didn't say it was, she said gently. I'm just saying. It's okay. Even the quietest hearts deserve to be heard. He looked down at the phone, still glowing faintly in his palm. He didn't know where this was going. He didn't know who she was or what this would become, but something inside him had changed. He didn't feel numb anymore. He felt present. And for the first time in a very long time, that was enough. Sophie Bennett did not believe in fate. She believed in data. In performance metrics, quarterly reports, market shifts. That's how she had built an empire, by outworking, outlasting, and outsmarting. Feelings had always been an obstacle to strategy. Vulnerability was for people who had time to fall apart. And yet ever since the first night she accidentally called him Liam, her world had begun to tilt in quiet, undeniable ways. She'd begun taking the long way home just to clear her head. She started drinking her tea without distraction, no longer drowning her thoughts in back-to-back conference calls. And worst of all, most dangerously of all, she found herself waiting for midnight. Waiting for his voice. That warm, grounded voice that never asked for anything. That never interrupted. That made her feel for the first time in years like she wasn't some malfunctioning machine. She felt like a person. Friday came heavy with clouds and an edge of frost in the air. Sophie arrived early at Bennett Media's downtown headquarters, a 20-story glass tower in the heart of the city. Her heels echoed against the marble lobby floor as she entered, nodding briefly at the security guard who greeted her like always. But nothing felt like always anymore. She walked with practiced confidence into the elevator, pressed the button for the executive floor, and stared at her reflection in the polished doors. Hair perfect. Lipstick unflawed, not a line out of place, and yet she looked unfamiliar, like someone pretending to be herself. The elevator stopped one floor early. The doors slid open and he was there. At first, Sophie didn't register him. Just another maintenance tech in a navy blue uniform toolbox and hand eyes scanning the wiring in the hallway junction box. Then their eyes met. Liam straightened slightly, his posture instinctively respectful. She was, after all, the CEO. But something flickered across his face. Something subtle. Recognition. Or maybe curiosity. Sophie's breath hitched. Her mind reeled. Could it be? He looked exactly like she had imagined. Not in appearance, but in presence. Solid. Calm. Not particularly polished, but real. Like a man who knew the weight of things and carried them anyway. She forced herself to step inside the elevator without hesitation, her heart suddenly racing. The doors closed. She stared at the panel, at the button for floor 20. But she didn't move. That was him. She knew it, but that couldn't be. Could it? That night, 12:04, came and went. No call. Liam sat on the edge of his bedphone, and hand thumb hovering over the screen. But he didn't call her. He'd seen her today. He was sure of it. The woman in the navy pantsuit. The CEO. Sophie. She hadn't said anything, but he'd seen the flicker in her eyes. She'd recognized him too. Maybe not fully, but enough to cause tension in the air between them. Now he wasn't sure what to do. For weeks he'd known her only as a voice, a feeling, a shared silence in the dark. But now she was real, tangible, a woman with influence and power, and let's be honest, an entire life far removed from his. What was he supposed to say to her now? "Hey, it's me, the guy from your midnight emotional unravelings. I was just fixing your building's lighting." He rubbed a hand over his face and sighed. Maybe this was the part where things broke. Maybe it was always meant to be anonymous, a brief rescue mission for two drifting souls, nothing more. Sophie sat in her luxury apartment light's dim glass of wine untouched beside her. Her phone rested on the coffee table like a loaded gun. She hated this feeling. Powerless, exposed, like someone had peeled back her armor and she couldn't put it back on. Why hadn't he called? Was he scared? Embarrassed worse, was he disappointed? She stood abruptly, pacing the room, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Then, without giving herself time to second-guess, she reached for her phone. 12:22 a.m. She called. It rang once, then again. "Hello?" His voice was quiet, cautious. "It's me," she said. "I didn't think you were going to call tonight. I wasn't sure you'd want me to." Silence stretched. "You saw me," she said, more statement than question. "I think so," he replied. "Did you?" "I did." Another pause. And now he asked. Sophie closed her eyes. "Now I don't know how to pretend I don't know your face." Liam exhaled. "It changes things." "Yes," she said. Then added, voice trembling slightly, "But I don't know if that's bad." Liam leaned back against the headboard, feeling something shift in his chest. Something open. "I liked not knowing," he admitted. It made everything feel simpler. "I didn't," she said, "because now that I've seen you, I can't stop wondering if you'd still listen the same way knowing who I am." "I would," he said immediately. "I'd listen harder." That silenced her. Then, softly, "I didn't expect someone like you to be standing in my hallway. You seemed too kind for this world." He chuckled. "Kind doesn't pay rent." She laughed. It was short, but genuine. "No, but maybe it saves people." He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "You looked strong today. In control." "That's the mask," she replied. "The voice you hear at night, that's the real me. The one I try to bury in daylight." Liam's voice was steady. "Then let's keep meeting at midnight, where the masks can fall." Sophie closed her eyes. "I'd like that." They didn't speak much more after that, but both slept easier than they had in years. The following Monday arrived with the sharpness of winter returning. The air was crisp, the streets glistened with the residue of frost, and Liam found himself staring longer than usual at his reflection in the side mirror of his van before heading into work. He was scheduled for an early job routine maintenance on electrical junctions inside Bennett Media's corporate offices. Just like last week. Just like when he'd seen her. Her, Sophie. He hadn't spoken her name aloud since that last call. He wasn't sure what came next, if anything should. But he couldn't stop thinking about her. Not just her voice, but her poise. The way her eyes had locked with his for that split second. There had been recognition there. A flash of unease. Or maybe curiosity. He couldn't tell. Liam had always been good at keeping things separate, compartmentalized. His grief in one boxwork and another fatherhood in its own sacred drawer. But Sophie, she'd slipped past all that. Somehow she'd become real in his world, and now nothing was neat anymore. Up on the 20th floor, Sophie was in her glass-walled office, staring blankly at her laptop. The numbers on the spreadsheet before her might as well have been hieroglyphs. Her assistant knocked lightly and entered without waiting. "Ms. Bennett, the tech, is here to check the electricals on the west wing. Do you want him escorted?" Sophie blinked. "Is it the same guy as last week? I believe so." Liam Carter. Her breath caught in her throat. She covered it with a cough. No need to escort. Let him work. She waited until her assistant left before standing and walking slowly to the window. From there, she could see part of the hallway beyond the frosted glass. She watched the door across the floor open, watched him step in. Same worn toolbox. Same calm gait. Same slight tilt of his shoulders as he scanned the panels on the wall. She didn't approach. She couldn't. Not yet. That night, Liam tucked Emma into bed, and as he turned off her nightlight, she spoke through a sleepy yawn. "Did you talk to your lady friend today?" He chuckled softly. "What makes you think she's my lady friend?" Emma sat up on one elbow, her curls tousled. "You smile when her name is on your phone." Liam paused. He hadn't realized he'd smiled. Not in a long time. "She's not exactly a friend," he said slowly. "We just talk." "Then maybe you should make her one." Emma mumbled, sinking back into the covers. "Friends make people feel better, like how Mrs. Gale gives us cookies when you look tired." He laughed, walked over and kissed her forehead. "I'll think about it." When 12:04 arrived, Liam was already holding his phone. It didn't ring. At 12:05, he gave in and called her. It rang 3 times. "Hello." Her voice was breathless, not out of surprise, but anticipation. "I wasn't sure if you'd call," she said. "I wasn't sure if you wanted me to." "I waited," she whispered, "but I was afraid. I don't know what to say now that we've seen each other." "You don't have to say anything." "Yes, I do," Sophie said. "I need to explain." Liam sat down the line between them, stretching with tension. "I've never called a stranger before," she began. "Never opened myself up like that. But I was breaking. And then your voice." She paused. It felt like the only real thing I'd touched in months. He stayed quiet, letting her speak. "And now I know who you are, what you do, where you stand when you're not just a voice in the dark." He took a breath. "And I don't know how to handle that," she said honestly. "You're grounded, steady, and I feel like I'm one crisis away from shattering in public. You think I don't feel the same." Liam's voice was calm but edged with emotion. "You think I haven't had to hold my daughter in one hand and my sanity in the other." The line was silent. I wasn't trying to pretend, he continued. I just didn't want to ruin what we had by dragging it into daylight. Sophie's voice softened. "Maybe we're just scared that something good can't survive outside the dark." Liam let that sink in. Then he said, "I'd still listen. Whether you were a name a CEO or a stranger in the night, I'd still care." A shaky exhale. "Why?" "Because you never asked me to be anything but human. And that's a rare gift." There was a long pause. Then she whispered, "I don't know how to be anyone else anymore, Liam." "Then don't," he said. "Let the mask fall. I'll still be here." The next morning, Sophie walked into her building, passed through the lobby like she always had, but this time her gaze flicked toward the maintenance desk. He wasn't there, and for the first time in weeks, she missed him in daylight. That same morning, Liam found a note tucked under his toolbox in the garage, hand-delivered by courier. It read, "I've decided not to run anymore. If you're ever ready to meet me under the sun, I'll be in the lobby. No mask, no name. Just me. S." He stared at the paper heart pounding not out of fear but anticipation. For the first time in years, someone wasn't walking away from the broken parts of him. They were walking toward them. The lobby of Bennett Media was a cathedral of glass and steel shiny surfaces, high ceilings, and cold air conditioning that hummed like distant wind. Sophie stood near the large, curved window facing the street, dressed not in her usual blazer, but in a soft cream sweater and jeans. Casual, unassuming, like someone trying for once to just be enough. The receptionists gave her curious glances. She never loitered. She never arrived without a meeting. She ignored them. She was waiting. The seconds ticked past noon, and for a moment doubt crept in like a cold draft. Maybe he wouldn't come. Maybe she'd ruined something that had only worked because it wasn't real. Then the front doors slid open. Liam stepped inside, toolbox in hand, wearing his standard navy work shirt sleeves rolled halfway up his forearms. His boots tracked melted snow behind him, and his hair was still damp from the wind outside. Their eyes locked. Everything else vanished. No marble, no glass, no cold. Just the two of them, one woman shedding the weight of control, and one man carrying the quiet strength of survival. Liam slowed his pace but didn't stop. Sophie stepped forward. "Hey," she said. "Hey." He returned a small, cautious smile breaking across his face. "You came. You asked." They stood awkwardly for a moment, surrounded by a world that didn't quite know what to do with them now that they'd stepped into it together. Sophie took a breath. "I don't know what this is, or what it's supposed to be. Me neither. But I don't want to go back to pretending," she said. "Not after everything we shared in the dark." Liam nodded. "We don't have to pretend, but we can take it slow." She smiled. "Slow's good." Just then the elevator dinged behind them and broke the moment. Liam glanced toward the sound. "I have a maintenance call on 16. Sophie gestured toward the cafe off the lobby. "Then, maybe. After I'll be here." No mask. Still me. He tilted his head slightly. "That's the version I like." And then he left simple as that, but something in her chest felt profoundly changed. She didn't feel alone. Not anymore. That night, 12:04 came and went. No call, but neither of them reached for their phone. Some things were no longer needed in the dark. The next day, a soft knock echoed on Sophie's office door. Her assistant popped in. "Miss Bennett, there's a little girl here asking for you. She says she knows your name from bedtime stories." Sophie blinked. "What?" Before she could ask more, a small figure slipped past the doorframe. "Hi," said Emma Carter, a burst of energy wrapped in a lavender parka and glittered sneakers. She clutched a paper envelope crinkled at the corners and beamed up at Sophie like they'd been pen pals for years. Sophie stepped out from behind her desk. "Emma." "My dad didn't know I was doing this," Emma said conspiratorially. "I asked Mrs. Gale to walk me here after school. She knows you're nice." Well, thank you. That's very brave of you." Emma held out the envelope. "I wrote something. For you." Sophie took it gently and opened it. Inside was a drawing in crayon stick figures, one taller with brown scribbles for hair, another with wavy lines and high heels, and a little girl in the middle holding both their hands. Above it was a big blue sky, and in uneven letters, "I think we all need stars, even grown-ups." Sophie's breath caught. Emma looked up at her, eyes wide and sincere. "You helped my dad smile again. I thought maybe he helped you too." Sophie knelt slowly. "He did, Emma. He really did." "Then maybe you shouldn't just talk at night," Emma said matter-of-factly. "Maybe you should go look at stars for real. With him." Sophie laughed softly, blinking away the sting behind her eyes. "You're wise for someone who still eats cereal with marshmallows." Emma grinned. "Daddy says I get it from Mom, but I think I just watch people." Sophie reached out, brushing a curl behind the girl's ear. "You're going to be something special, Emma. You already are." Emma shrugged. "You are too. You just forgot." That evening, Liam opened the front door to find Gail holding Emma's hand, a knowing smile on her face. "Before you say anything, yes, I walked her safely, and yes, I had permission from her teacher." Emma skipped into the house as if she hadn't just given a corporate CEO an emotional epiphany. Gail leaned in, eyes twinkling. She drew Sophie a picture. Said it needed to be done. Liam exhaled and rubbed the back of his neck. "Did she?" "She did. And I have to say, your kid's got taste. That woman looked like someone who could run the world, but just needed a reason to slow down." He laughed, shaking his head. She's something." "So are you," Gail said. "Don't let your past trick you into thinking you can't be part of something new." He didn't answer, but he looked toward the kitchen where Emma was humming and setting the table for two, and he thought, just maybe the old woman was right. Later that night, Liam received a text. It wasn't from an unknown number. "Sophie, Your daughter thinks we need to look at the stars. Want to take her advice?" Liam stared at the screen, heart pounding softly in his chest. Not fear this time, but hope. He typed back, "Liam, only if you promise to show up as you. No masks, just the woman I've been waiting to meet." They met under the stars 2 nights later. Not at a fancy rooftop or candlelit patio, but in Liam's modest backyard where a rickety lawn chair and a wool blanket became their corner of the universe. The air was cool, and a faint scent of pine drifted in from the woods nearby. Emma had gone to bed early after insisting that Sophie take the good chair and whispering to her dad that she'd already brushed her teeth twice. Sophie looked up at the constellations overhead. "I forgot how quiet it is out here." Liam chuckled. "That's because you spend your nights in a glass tower." She smiled but didn't look at him. "It's strange. The city makes you feel important." But silence. "It makes you feel honest." He glanced at her, then noticing how different she looked in the dim backyard light. Not polished, not powerful, just real. "That's why I sit out here sometimes," he said, "to remember what's underneath the noise." She nodded, wrapping the blanket tighter around herself. "I've built a life on noise." Liam turned his eyes to the sky. Then maybe it's time to listen to the quiet. For a few minutes they sat in companionable silence, broken only by the creak of a tree branch in the wind and the hum of faraway traffic. Then Sophie spoke, almost in a whisper. "Do you ever feel like you're pretending?" she asked. "Like you're performing what people expect of you instead of just being?" He didn't answer right away. Then, every day, at least until about 8 to 10 p.m. when Emma asks me to help brush her unicorn's hair, and I remember I'm just a dad trying to survive. Sophie laughed, and it was a sound Liam wished he could bottle. It wasn't refined or delicate, it was unguarded. "I think I envy that," she said. "That your life has something pure in it. Something that doesn't want anything from you but your presence." He glanced at her. "Maybe you're just around people who forgot how to want the right things." She looked down, picking at a loose thread on the blanket. "That includes me." "No," Sophie, Liam said gently. "You called at 12:04 because a part of you remembered who you are, past the CEO, past the image. That part of you is still there. You're just learning to listen to her again." She didn't speak, but her eyes shimmered under the stars. And for a while, that was enough. But even the most honest nights have a morning after. The next week, Sophie sat at the head of the long executive boardroom table. Her hair was pinned up her blouse immaculate, her words sharp. Around her were 8 men and women in expensive suits, but not one of them looked at her the way Liam had. And that terrified her. Because for the first time in her life, she didn't want to impress them. She wanted to be known. But the room didn't allow for that. Not in this world. Not in this company she'd built with sweat and perfection. She could feel herself slipping back into the persona, the voice, the armor. George, her longtime COO and trusted lieutenant, leaned forward mid-meeting. "There's buzz around your little visitor in the lobby last week. One of the junior PR guys saw you talking to a maintenance contractor. Is that something I should be concerned about?" Sophie's jaw tightened. "He's a friend." George arched a brow. "From what part of your world?" Her silence was its own kind of answer. George exhaled, voice lowering. "You have a reputation to protect. Personal stories get out, especially when they don't fit the narrative. And we both know the press will twist any crack in the armor." Sophie looked down at the table at the pen in her hand, at the reflection of a woman she barely recognized anymore. After the meeting, she walked past her office and kept going straight to the elevator, straight to the lobby, straight into the open air. That night, Liam waited for her. Not at 12:04. At 8:30, with hot chocolate and an extra blanket, watching the stars and listening for footsteps that never came. At 9:30, he checked his phone. No text, no voicemail. By 10:15, Emma wandered out in her pajamas. "She's not coming?" she asked sleepily. Liam shook his head. "Not tonight." Emma climbed into his lap, curling under his arm like a kitten. Maybe she's scared. Of what? Of liking us. Liam stared out into the night. Maybe. Emma's breath slowed as she drifted off warm and small against him. He looked up at the sky, the same stars overhead. But tonight they felt farther away. Sophie didn't call that night, or the next. At the end of the week, Sophie found herself back in her office, staring at the framed magazine cover on her wall. Bennett Media's Woman of the Year. But all she could see was what wasn't in the frame. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't real. The version of her that sat under stars in a backyard sipping cocoa and laughing at unicorn hair was missing entirely, and she missed that version of herself more than anything. Later that night, alone in her car on a side street 2 blocks from Liam's house, she stared at her phone. She didn't dial. Instead, she whispered into the silence of her car, "I'm not okay, but I still want to try." The wind had picked up just after midnight, rustling the branches outside Liam's window. He lay in bed, one arm behind his head, the other resting across his chest phone inches from his hand. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that pressed into you rather than offered rest. He hadn't heard from Sophie in 5 days. Not since that last night she'd promised to meet under the stars. He'd told himself he wouldn't call her, that she needed space, that maybe she'd slipped back into her old life, into the fortress of corner offices and curated perfection. But that didn't make the ache any less. He closed his eyes. And then, as if summoned by the beat between 2 heartbeats, the phone rang. Not a message, not a voicemail, a call. 12:04 a.m. Liam sat up breath-catching and answered without looking. "Hello?" There was a pause, a breath, and then her voice soft and frayed at the edges. "I didn't know if you'd answer." He swallowed hard. "I wasn't sure you'd call." "I almost didn't," she whispered. "I parked outside your street 3 nights ago. I watched your porch light go out. I couldn't get out of the car." Liam's chest tightened. "You were here. I couldn't face you," she admitted. "Not after disappearing like that." "Why did you—" Sophie didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice cracked. "Because I'm scared of what it means when someone sees me without the mask and stays." Liam leaned forward, fingers pressing into the blanket. "You don't have to be perfect for me to stay, Sophie. That's easy for you to say. You're grounded, real. You've lost things and survived. I've just hidden." Liam exhaled slowly. "You think I didn't hide after Claire died?" She stilled. "Claire, my wife," he said quietly. "It's been 3 years. Car accident. Emma was only 3. I hid in silence and work and keeping just busy enough not to feel the emptiness. I know what it's like to be afraid of being seen." Sophie's breath hitched. "I didn't know. I never told you. Not because I was protecting myself, but because I didn't want you to feel like you had to carry my pain, too. I wish you had told me." He smiled sadly. "I just did?" Silence settled between them, not heavy but full. Then Sophie said, "I lost someone too. My dad. A year ago. He was the only person who made me feel like I didn't have to be impressive to be loved. When he died, Brent, my fiancé, left. Said I wasn't myself anymore, but the truth is, I didn't know who that was to begin with." "Was that the night you called me?" "Yes," she said. "I left a gala. Everyone was laughing and networking and being important. I felt like I was screaming into a soundproof room. So, you picked up the phone. I didn't mean to call you. I meant to call the grief hotline. But I misdialed." Liam's throat tightened. "And still, we talked." "We did more than talk," Sophie whispered. "You reminded me I was still human, that I hadn't completely disappeared." Liam's voice was soft. "You were never gone. You just forgot how to come home." Another pause. Then, through a shaky breath, Sophie said, "Liam, I don't know what this is, but I miss you, not just your voice. You." He let her words settle raw and sincere. The woman who once spoke with polished power was now just a woman who wanted to be loved without conditions. "I miss you too," he said. and I don't need to define this, but I do want to keep building it. I'm not good at building, she said, almost apologetically. You don't have to be. I've got the tools, he replied with a gentle smile in his voice. Sophie laughed the sound small but warm. That was terribly corny, and completely true. They were quiet for a long moment, each absorbing the presence of the other in the safest space they knew, not the daylight, not the roles they wore, but the fragile place between midnight and dawn. Then Sophie asked, "Can I come over?" Not tonight. But soon Liam's heart beat faster. Anytime he said, "The porch light stays on for a reason." The next morning, Liam found Emma at the breakfast table with her cereal and her coloring book. She looked up with sleepy eyes. "Did she call?" He paused, surprised. "How'd you know?" Emma shrugged. "Because you're smiling again." Liam ruffled her curls. "She might visit soon." Emma grinned. "Then I better draw her something better than a stick figure this time." Elsewhere in the city, Sophie stood in front of her bathroom mirror wiping away the last smudge of mascara from eyes that had wept not from sadness, but from release. She looked at herself, not as a CEO, not as a woman who'd been left, not as a voice in the dark, but as someone coming back into her own skin. She pulled out her phone and typed a message. "Thank you for waiting in the silence. I'm ready to be seen now." She hit send. Then she stepped into the sunlight. The invitation wasn't extravagant, no formal letter, no catered setting. Just a simple text from Sophie Company Gala this Saturday. "Come as you are. Bring Emma if she wants. I'd like you to see my world, not to impress you, to share it." Liam stared at the message for a long time. He read it twice, then again. He wasn't a gala man. He didn't own a suit. He hadn't shaken hands with men in ties since his military discharge, and even then the handshakes felt more like contracts than connection. Still, the tone of her message was gentle, honest, not a test, an invitation. That night, over dinner, he asked Emma, "You remember Sophie's Company?" Emma looked up from her plate of spaghetti, the building with the shiny floors. "That's the one. She sent us an invitation. They're having a big party Saturday night." Emma's eyes widened. A party with real napkins and music, something like that. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Will there be dancing?" Liam smiled. "Possibly." Emma grinned. "Then you can't say no." On Saturday, Liam stood in front of the bathroom mirror awkwardly adjusting the collar of a borrowed blazer. Gail had found it in her late husband's closet, swearing it still had charm left in the seams. The sleeves were a touch long, but the shoulders fit. He smoothed his hair, exhaled, and stepped into the living room. Emma gasped like she'd just seen Superman step off the page. "Daddy, you look like a movie star." He laughed, slightly red. "You think so?" She nodded, clutching her tiny clutch purse. "Sophie is gonna faint." "Let's hope not." The Bennett Media Gala was held at the Downtown Art Museum, a breathtaking venue with glass ceilings and soft lighting that made the paintings shimmer like reflections on water. As Liam entered, with Emma, he felt every pair of eyes flick toward him. Not with malice, but with curiosity. The man in worn dress shoes. The man holding the hand of a little girl in sparkly sneakers. He almost turned back, but then he saw her. Across the gallery floor, Sophie stood beneath a suspended sculpture of cascading lights wearing a simple dark blue dress that caught the room like moonlight in motion. She wasn't holding a wine glass. She wasn't networking. She was waiting. And the moment she saw them, her face changed not for show, but for real. She smiled and it reached her eyes. She walked toward them, her steps deliberate but unhurried as though she was walking toward the most important decision of her life and had already made it. "Hi," she said, kneeling in front of Emma. "You must be the one who gives the best advice." Emma nodded. "I told Daddy you were worth showing up for." Sophie laughed, glancing up at Liam. "She's not wrong." Then she stood. The room seemed to fade. Liam offered a hand. "You look—" "Real," she finished teasing, but soft. "Yes." and beautiful. She took his hand. "You ready to meet my world? I'm more interested in meeting the version of you that lives behind it." That stopped her, just for a beat. Then she leaned in and kissed his cheek. "Come on," she whispered. "I want you to see what I've built, then tell me what I might have missed." Over the next hour, Liam met her colleagues aboard her assistant, who eyed him with barely veiled surprise, and a man in glasses named Jonathan, who asked pointedly, "So, you're the guy?" "The guy?" Liam asked. Sophie answered, "The one who answered when I needed someone most." Jonathan blinked, then offered a respectful nod. Emma, meanwhile, stole the show, complimenting a woman's shoes, eating a mini cupcake in one bite, and asking a violinist how long it took to learn to make feelings come out of strings. But the real moment came when Sophie stood on stage to address the room. She spoke clearly, confidently, but not polished, not scripted. As most of you know, she began this year has been one of change for me personally and for the company. What you may not know is that the most valuable thing I've gained this year didn't come from strategy or sales. She paused. The room stilled. It came from a phone call. A wrong number, actually. A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. I called in the middle of a panic attack thinking I was reaching a hotline. But the man who answered wasn't a professional. He was a father, a widower, a stranger who chose to stay on the line not because it was his job, but because it was his nature. She looked directly at Liam. Since then, I've come to believe that true success isn't what we build for the world, it's who we become when no one's watching, and who we choose to stay with when the lights are low. There was a hush then, quiet, genuine applause. Emma tugged Liam's hand. "She means you, Daddy." "I know," he said, voice thick. After the speech, as people mingled and music filled the hall again, Sophie returned to them. Liam met her eyes. "That was brave." "No," she said. "That was honest. I think I've spent my whole life chasing applause, but tonight I just wanted to be known." And now he asked. She reached out, fingers brushing his. "Now I want to see what it feels like. To build something that doesn't need to impress anyone." He looked down at her hand, then at Emma, spinning in circles under the twinkle lights. He squeezed Sophie's hand. "Then let's build it." On Monday morning, Sophie stepped into the executive elevator of Bennett Media with a lightness in her chest she hadn't felt in years. The kind that doesn't come from victory or strategy, but from waking up and knowing she no longer had to perform to be worth loving. She wore no jewelry, no designer heels, just a tailored navy suit and a quiet kind of confidence. The gala had gone better than she could have imagined. Her words, raw and unscripted, hadn't just landed, they'd settled into the hearts of the people who mattered most. And Liam. He had stayed by her side through it all, not as her statement, but as her anchor. But as the elevator doors opened to the 20th floor, Sophie felt the shift before she saw it. George was already waiting by her office door. The look on his face wasn't rage. It was worse control, wrapped in politeness. "Good morning," he said evenly. Sophie met his eyes. "George, do you have a moment?" He gestured toward the glass-walled conference room where 3 board members waited inside, their expressions unreadable. Sophie hesitated. "Sure." Inside, George closed the door and turned, hands clasped like a lawyer preparing to present his case. "I'll get right to it," he said. "There's been talk after the gala." About what Sophie asked, voice steady. "About you, about your speech, about the man you brought." Sophie didn't flinch. "Liam." George gave a tight smile. "Yes." "Liam, the working-class contractor you described as the man who saved you. That's what happened." One of the board members, a woman named Diana, leaned forward. "Sophie, it was a lovely speech, but it's raised questions, concerns." "Concerns," Sophie repeated. George nodded. "Shareholders are wondering if your personal entanglements are beginning to cloud your professional judgment. You're seen as the face of Bennett Media, and your face has always been polished, aspirational." Sophie inhaled deeply. "And now it's human. That's the problem, isn't it? Diana exchanged a glance with another member. You know how perception works in our industry. Your identity has value. That value must be protected. And if I choose to protect what's real instead of what's marketable? Sophie asked calmly. George tilted his head. We're not saying you can't have a personal life, but when it becomes the headline, when it challenges the narrative, then we have to talk about optics, about the brand. Sophie stood still, but inside her something cracked. Not from the criticism, but from the realization they didn't see her. They saw what she'd built for them. And now that she wanted to be herself, she was a threat. She thought of Liam, of Emma spinning beneath museum lights, of laughter on a back porch and silence that healed. She looked George in the eye. I won't apologize for being a person, for loving someone who reminds me who I am when the noise stops. Sophie, George began, but she raised a hand. If that's unacceptable to the board, then let's be clear about it. I won't pretend anymore. I won't hide the parts of me that make me whole. No one spoke, so she turned and walked out. That evening she didn't wait for 12:04. She called Liam at 7:46. He answered on the second ring. Hey, he said, and though she wanted to be strong, the tremor in her voice gave her away. I had a meeting this morning. She began with the board. What happened? He asked gently. They told me that being with you, being myself, puts the company at risk. Silence. Then Liam's voice, soft but sure. Do you believe that? No, she said. I believe that I finally said something real, and the people who benefited from my mask got scared. He didn't speak right away. When he did, it wasn't with reassurance. It was with truth. You don't have to choose me, he said, but you shouldn't have to choose against yourself. That stopped her cold. She blinked into the quiet of her car parked outside the grocery store. I don't know what I'm doing, she admitted. You're doing what no one ever taught us to do, he said. You're choosing wholeness over performance. Tears blurred her vision. Why are you so steady when I'm falling apart? He laughed softly. Because I've fallen apart before. I know what it sounds like when the pieces start to fall into place instead of away. 2 days later, Sophie stood at the head of the conference table again. Same board, same polished glass. But this time she brought a folder. Inside it, her resignation. Not a protest. Not a failure. A reclaiming. I'm proud of what I built, she told them. But if the cost of leadership is losing myself, then it's too high. This company deserves a face that's unshakable. I deserve a life that's unfiltered. Diana opened her mouth to protest. George didn't speak. Sophie smiled. Thank you. For the years. And for the clarity. That night, she walked up the path to Liam's front door with Emma's drawing in her purse and peace in her step. Liam answered before she could knock. She smiled. I quit today. He raised a brow. You okay? I've never been more okay, she said. Then added, Do you still have that porch light on? He stepped aside, voice warm. It's always been for you. The next morning, the sun spilled golden light over the kitchen counter where Sophie stood, sleeves rolled, flipping pancakes. She didn't need to. Liam was more than capable of making breakfast, but she insisted. Something about finally choosing this life made her want to live inside it. Emma sat at the table humming to herself as she drew another galaxy of crayon stars. Liam leaned in the doorway, arms folded, watching the scene with a quiet wonder he didn't dare speak aloud. You always this domestic, he teased. Sophie glanced over her shoulder. Only when I'm nervous. What for? She smiled faintly. Because this feels real. And real is terrifying. He walked over gently, took the spatula from her hand and replaced it with a cup of coffee. Then, let's be terrified together. They spent the day like a slow-breath library, books and errands, a trip to the farmer's market where Emma charmed every vendor, and an afternoon walk down by the river where Sophie kicked off her heels and waded barefoot with Emma, laughter echoing under the trees. As the sun began to dip, they returned home and sat on the porch wrapped in old blankets, sipping tea as evening came. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, Sophie admitted softly. Liam nodded. That's the problem with survival mode. Even when you're safe, your body doesn't believe it. She leaned her head on his shoulder. So, what do? We keep showing up, until the fear runs out of breath. She smiled against his shirt. That's poetic. That's exhaustion. He chuckled. Poetry's a side effect. Later that evening, Emma was fast asleep with a flashlight still glowing under her blanket fort, and Liam stood in the backyard staring up at the stars alone. Sophie stepped out quietly, wrapping her arms around herself as the cool air brushed her skin. Thought you disappeared on me, she said. I was giving the stars a chance to show off before you came out and stole the spotlight. She rolled her eyes but smiled. You always this charming. Only when I'm in love, he said so gently it didn't feel like a grand gesture. Just truth spoken plainly. Sophie stilled, not because she was unsure, but because for the first time those words didn't bring fear. They brought peace. She stepped closer. Say it again. He turned to face her eyes, calm. I'm in love with you. She took a breath. Then I guess I should say it too. You don't have to. I want to. She touched his face. I'm in love with you, Liam Carter. Not the voice in the dark. Not the man I imagined. You. The man who listens when no one else knows what to say. The father who gives his daughter stars when she asks for cereal. The man who doesn't fix me, but lets me fix myself. A long silence passed between them. But it wasn't empty. It was full of history, of healing, of hope. Then Liam looked up. Dance with me. Sophie blinked. There's no music. He pulled his phone from his pocket and tapped a playlist. A soft acoustic melody began to float into the night, gentle guitar, a voice like old velvet. Now there is, he whispered. He held out his hand, and Sophie stepped into his arms. They swayed beneath the stars, surrounded by crickets and the faint hum of porch lights. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Inside the house, Emma peeked out from her blanket fort, watching from the window with a sleepy smile. She whispered to herself, They found it. Then she turned off her flashlight and curled deeper into her blankets, secure in a world that finally made sense. A few days later, Sophie stood at a podium, not at a press conference, but at a quiet event hosted by a local nonprofit dedicated to mental health awareness. She was no longer CEO. She wasn't there in stilettos or designer labels. She was there in flats, jeans, and her truth. Behind her on a banner were the words, The 1204 Foundation, because someone always needs you most in the dark. Sophie looked out at the modest crowd and smiled. Many of you know I left the corporate world recently. Not because I failed, but because I realized success without soul is just performance. This foundation was born from a wrong number at the right time, from a conversation that saved me when I didn't think I deserved to be saved, and from a man who stayed on the line when he didn't have to. She turned, and Liam stood at the edge of the crowd, Emma holding his hand. Both were beaming. This foundation, Sophie continued, is for anyone who has ever felt invisible at midnight, and for the strangers who choose to see them anyway. That night, back on the porch as the clock inched toward 12:04 a.m., Liam glanced at his phone. It didn't ring. Instead, Sophie placed her hand over his. You don't have to wait for the call anymore, she said. Why? Because I'm already here. The seasons shifted quietly. Winter surrendered to spring, and with it came softer mornings, children's laughter in the park again, and evening skies blushing pink instead of gray. Life, Liam found, didn't announce healing like a thunderclap. It returned in whispers, small routines, familiar laughter, a home that finally felt full again. The house once shadowed by memory now bloomed with life. Sophie had moved in gradually, not with fanfare, but with toothbrushes, shared calendars, and the unmistakable scent of her coffee blend. Her shoes by the door, her laugh in the kitchen, her presence not loud but known. Emma had taken it all in stride as children do when love walks in gently. She began calling Sophie my person at school, then bonus mom, in whispered goodnights. She asked questions like, "Do you think the stars miss us when it's cloudy, and will we still be together when I'm a grandma?" To both, Sophie had answered without hesitation, "Yes, always." One weekend afternoon, Sophie sat at the dining table with Emma, a cup of tea steaming beside her while Liam fixed a loose door hinge nearby. "What are you working on, Em?" Sophie asked. Emma held up a folded paper booklet with a crayon-drawn cover, Our Family Story, by Emma Carter. Inside were stick figures, bright colors, and short sentences scrawled in big, careful letters. Sophie flipped to the second page. It read, "My dad was sad." Then he talked to a lady in the phone. She was sad, too. Then they talked, and they were not sad. Then they hugged. Then we had pancakes. She smiled, blinking away sudden tears. "This is beautiful." Emma grinned. "It's for school. My teacher said stories help people remember." Sophie turned to the last page. "Now we are happy. I have a real home. And at night, nobody cries alone." Sophie reached out and pulled Emma into her lap. "You are going to change the world someday, sweetheart." "I already did," Emma said matter-of-factly. "I helped you both stop being scared." Liam, overhearing from across the room, placed his screwdriver down and walked over. He kissed Emma's forehead and met Sophie's eyes over her shoulder. "She's not wrong," he said. That evening they sat together on the back porch, a ritual now deeply rooted in their lives. The stars were bright, and the air smelled faintly of new grass and lilac. "I never told you something," Sophie said quietly. Liam turned to her. "That first night, the reason I misdialed. The last number of the grief hotline was a 4. I pressed a 3. Close miss, he said. Or perfect miss, she corrected, because the person who was supposed to answer did. He took her hand. Some calls aren't wrong. They're meant to find the one who's been listening all along." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "You still keep the porch light on." "Always," he said. "But now it's not for someone who's lost." She looked up. "Then who is it?" For he kissed her temple. "For everyone who finds their way home." A few weeks later, the 1204 Foundation held its first full community event, a starlight storytelling night for families coping with grief, mental health challenges, and quiet loneliness. The auditorium was modest, filled with folding chairs, soft lamps, and warm voices. Liam stood at the back helping organize refreshments while Sophie welcomed guests. Emma was the first one to step onto the little stage. She wore her favorite yellow dress and clutched her story booklet. "My name's Emma," she said into the microphone, "and I want to tell you something real." The room quieted. "A long time ago, my daddy was sad, and a lady was sad, and they didn't know each other. But one night they found each other just by listening. They didn't even know names yet. Just feelings. And then they got brave." She smiled wide. "Now we have a home. Not a house. A real home. And I want other people to know it's okay to be the one who calls. And it's okay to be the one who answers." There was not a dry eye in the room. After the event, as they packed up chairs and folded tablecloths, a man approached Liam, middle-aged with tired eyes and a voice as soft as gravel. "I lost my son last year," the man said. "Tonight was the first time I've heard someone say something that didn't feel like pity. Just truth." Liam nodded. Sometimes truth needs a quiet place to land. The man shook his hand. "Thanks for building one." That night at 12:04 a.m., Liam's phone didn't ring. It hadn't in months. And yet he found himself glancing at it. Not in fear, not in sadness, but in gratitude. Because 12:04 had once been the loneliest moment of his life. Single dad, picked up the wrong woman at the airport. But the CEO said, "I've been looking for you." The rain came down in chaotic sheets, slashing the windshield like nature's own tantrum. Ethan Blake leaned forward in the driver's seat of the hotel's black SUV, squinting through the wipers as they struggled to keep up. JFK International was a maze of horns, headlights, and human exhaustion. Flights were delayed, rerouted, or outright canceled. Travelers shuffled like ghosts, their umbrellas flipping inside out in the wind. Ethan glanced at the dashboard clock, 5:42 p.m. His phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A message from hotel dispatch blinked on screen. Guest Catherine Walters has canceled. Do not proceed. He sighed. This was his last pickup for the day. Maybe he'd make it home early enough to read Liam a bedtime story. Not that the 7-year-old needed stories anymore, but Ethan liked reading them anyway. It was one of the few places where his voice felt safe, unjudged, like it still held value. He was about to pull away when the rear terminal doors hissed open. A woman stepped into the storm, dragging a small leather suitcase behind her. No umbrella, just a drenched wool coat clinging to her like a second skin. She paused on the curb, blinking rain from her lashes, scanning the crowd like she'd just realized she was on the wrong planet. Something about her stopped him. Maybe it was the way she clutched her coat shut, or the unguarded confusion in her expression. Maybe it was the fact that she looked like someone who never got rained on, someone used to first-class lounges and private cars, not stranded curbsides. He opened the window halfway. Miss Walters. The woman turned. For a beat too long, she said nothing. Her lips parted as if she were about to say no, but then something flickered across her face. Recognition. Hope. Sadness. Yes, she said. I suppose I am. Ethan hesitated, but the look in her eyes, like she hadn't spoken that word in years, made him unlock the doors. She slid into the back seat, dripping water onto the floor mats. Ethan offered her a towel he kept for Liam's soccer games. She accepted it with a faint smile, but said nothing else. No small talk, no instructions. Just silence, heavy and oddly intimate. As he drove, he kept glancing at her through the rear-view mirror. Her features were striking, refined, confident, but not overly made up. There was a calmness about her that felt rehearsed, like someone who had practiced serenity for years. Halfway through Queens, he cleared his throat. Sorry about the wait. The airport's a mess today. She nodded without looking up. It's all right. Some things are worth waiting for. The way she said it, it didn't sound like she was talking about traffic. Ethan's grip on the steering wheel tightened slightly. By the time they crossed the East River, the rain had eased into a whisper, tapping gently against the windows like a lullaby, trying to calm something inside them both. The Manhattan skyline loomed ahead, washed in gray. Ethan flicked his signal as they neared the hotel. You sure you're staying at the Rosewood? I don't have a reservation under your name. That's all right, she said. I made some spontaneous changes. He parked beneath the awning, stepping out quickly to open her door. As she stepped onto the pavement, she paused, staring at him with a look that made his skin crawl in the most inexplicable way. You really don't remember me, do you? She asked softly. The words hit him like a flash of heat through the cold. He blinked. Sorry. Should I? She tilted her head, her wet hair clinging to her cheek. No, I suppose not. He watched her walk through the lobby doors, her heels clicking like punctuation marks at the end of some unfinished sentence. Back in the driver's seat, Ethan sat motionless for a long minute. Something about her bothered him, not in a bad way, but in the way an old song does when you can't remember the lyrics but can still hum the melody. He shook it off. His job was done. He had a kid to get home to laundry to fold and a sink full of cereal bowls waiting to remind him how ordinary his life really was. But as he pulled away from the curb, the clouds above began to break. A single shaft of sunlight pierced the storm landing directly on the spot where she had just stood. He didn't know it yet, but nothing about this day had been a mistake. The hotel lobby shimmered with quiet elegance. Crystal pendant lights, polished marble floors, and fresh-cut orchids whose perfume lingered like the memory of a kiss. Claire stepped inside, leaving the storm behind her, but she didn't shake off the chill. It was the kind that came from within, not from rain or wind, but from memories brushing against the edge of the present. The front desk attendant greeted her warmly, fingers poised above the keyboard. "Good evening. May I have your name for the reservation?" Claire hesitated. 1,000 names passed through her mind, names she'd signed on mergers contracts and letters of intent, names the press had plastered across headlines like badges of war, but none of them felt like hers tonight. Finally, she said, "Claire Donovan." The attendant typed. A beat passed, then another. He frowned. "I'm sorry, Miss Donovan. I don't see a reservation under your name. Perhaps it's under someone else's." She smiled faintly. "It's all right. I didn't book ahead." He blinked. "Oh. Well, we do have availability. Would you like a deluxe or an executive suite? I'll take whatever's furthest from the elevators," she said. "Quiet, if possible." He nodded and began the process. Claire's eyes drifted across the lobby. Through the glass doors, she could still see Ethan's SUV pulling away from the curb. Something tightened in her chest, some inexplicable blend of relief, pain, and hope. She had found him. But he didn't remember her. Up in her room, Claire dropped her coat over a velvet chair and peeled off her damp sweater. The suite was tasteful modern lines, soft lighting, quiet luxury, but to her it felt hollow. Most places did these days. She stood by the window and watched the rain. The city shimmered below its lights, glinting through the water-streaked glass like stars trying to fight their way through a storm. It had taken her nearly 15 years. 15 years since that night in the hospital. 15 years of therapy, of achievements, of building an empire out of the ashes of her grief. And still she had never stopped looking. She hadn't even known his name. No badge, no uniform, just a man in a worn hoodie sitting beside her as she broke down silently, offering her his coat and then his hand. He didn't speak. He just stayed. While nurses bustled past and doctors whispered final words to other families, he had anchored her to the earth. That night, he had saved her. And now she'd looked into his eyes again. The same eyes. Worn, now wearier, lined with responsibility. A father's eyes. But kind. Still impossibly kind. He didn't remember. Of course he didn't. The next morning, Ethan arrived early for work, Liam in tow. The boy was half asleep, clinging to his backpack like it was a life raft. "I hate Thursdays," Liam muttered as they entered through the service entrance. Ethan tousled his son's hair. "Thursdays build character. So do cold bagels, missed school buses, and your old man's bad singing." Liam grunted, but a smile crept in anyway. Ethan dropped him off with the front desk clerk who watched Liam on early shifts when no babysitter was available. As he passed the lobby, his eyes flicked automatically toward the guest list tablet. Claire Donovan. Room 1407. Still checked in. He told himself not to care. Clients came and went. So did names. But he couldn't stop remembering the way she'd said that line. "You don't remember me, do you?" Why did it haunt him? Later that afternoon, Claire entered the lobby wearing a fresh change of clothes, slim charcoal slacks, and a navy blouse, and her posture was different. Composed. Quietly powerful. The kind of presence that turned heads without trying. Ethan was speaking to a French couple whose luggage had gone missing in transit. He greeted them fluently in their native tongue, helping them calm down, switching effortlessly between English and French as he solved the issue. Claire paused a few feet away, watching him. The same man who once gave her his only warmth, now helping strangers with that same silent grace. He hadn't changed. Life had bent him, maybe even broken him, but he hadn't let it make him cold. When he turned and saw her, their eyes locked. Just a moment. No smile, no wave. Just the weight of something unspoken passing between them. That evening, Claire dined alone in the rooftop restaurant. She brought a notebook, but didn't open it. Instead, she watched the city breathe beneath her, its pulse constant, eternal. She had flown into New York under the guise of a business visit. But she hadn't told her team, hadn't scheduled a single meeting. She hadn't even packed a laptop. That wasn't like her, but neither was this. What was this obsession? No, it wasn't that. She wasn't chasing a fantasy. She was chasing the man who once sat beside her in silence and reminded her that even in the worst moment of her life, she wasn't invisible. She took a deep breath. Maybe she couldn't make him remember. But maybe that didn't matter. Maybe she just needed to give back not out of obligation, but because sometimes life hands you a miracle in secret, and if you're lucky enough to hold on to it, you honor it the only way you can, by giving someone else the chance to be seen. She pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back in small, deliberate handwriting. Then she folded it and slid it into an envelope. Tomorrow she would give it to him, not to demand recognition, not to claim anything, but to say, "I remember." And it mattered. The sun filtered gently through the windows of the Rosewoods Cafe, painting golden stripes across the hardwood floors and scattering warmth on a chilly New York morning. Claire sat at a corner table near the window, her coffee untouched, her gaze fixed on a small boy seated 2 tables away. A mop of dark blonde curls, a paper airplane in one hand, a slice of banana bread in the other. He was humming to himself something off-key and sweet. She couldn't look away. Ethan appeared moments later with 2 mugs of cocoa and a napkin he tucked under the boy's chin with practiced tenderness. The kind of touch that had long become second nature. "Careful, Liam. No more cocoa avalanches today." The boy giggled. That was one time Claire smiled without realizing it. When Ethan noticed her, he offered a polite nod, professional restrained. But there was hesitation in it. The way someone acknowledges a dream they're not sure they really had. Claire took that as permission. "May I?" she asked, approaching their table. Liam looked up first. His eyes were curious, fearless. "You're the lady from the elevator," he said, grinning. "I am," Claire replied, kneeling slightly to his eye level. "And I heard someone humming a tune I used to hum when I was your age. It's called Mission Mars." "I made it up," Liam said proudly. Ethan gave Claire an apologetic look. "He's a composer, among other things." Claire chuckled. "That's impressive. May I sit for a minute?" Ethan paused, unsure. But Liam, clearly having made the executive decision for the group, pulled out the chair beside him. "You can sit here," he said. Claire took the seat, easing into the strange comfort of their company. For a few minutes conversation flowed like a quiet stream, childish observations from Liam, cautious replies from Ethan, and a gentle rhythm between the 3 of them that felt oddly right. "What do you do?" Liam asked between bites. Claire smiled. "I'm a problem solver." "Like my dad," he said instantly. "He fixes everything. The radiator, the dishwasher, a broken nose one time." Ethan groaned. "That was an accident at soccer, not a bar fight." Claire laughed. "I believe you." And you, Liam, pressed. "What kind of problems?" She hesitated, choosing her words. "I help people who are stuck, people who've forgotten how big the world can be. I remind them." Liam gave a small, thoughtful nod. "That's cool." Ethan's eyes softened. "That's more poetic than most CEOs I know." Claire tilted her head. "How do you know I'm a CEO? You're staying in a penthouse, you wear clothes like someone who doesn't check price tags, and your phone hasn't stopped buzzing since you sat down, but you haven't looked at it once. That's power. Real power doesn't need to announce itself." Claire blinked, stunned into silence for half a second. Then, "You're observant." "I drive people for a living," Ethan replied. "I pay attention. People talk more when they think you're not listening." Something about that statement stayed with her. She leaned forward slightly. "And do you ever feel stuck?" Ethan hesitated. "Sometimes." Liam looked between them. "We were stuck in an elevator once. That was the worst." Claire smiled. "Was it scary?" "No," Liam said seriously. "Because Dad held my hand and told me we'd be fine. And he was right." She swallowed hard. The image pierced something soft in her the same way that long-ago night in the hospital had when she thought the world had ended. But someone beside her refused to let her fall apart. Later that day, Ethan was rearranging guest luggage in the back storage bay when the hotel concierge passed him an envelope. "This was left for you by the guest in 1407, she said. He opened it. Inside a business card. Claire Donovan, CEO, Donovan Nexus. And beneath the printed words, handwritten in fine blue ink, "Sometimes silence says more than words. You didn't speak that night, but you stayed." Ethan stood frozen, the card trembling slightly in his hand. That night. That night. A flurry of dim recollections flickered, flashing white hallway lights, the sound of someone weeping on the bench outside the NICU. His own grief a raging sea. He'd sat next to her, not to fix her, just to be there, because she looked as lost as he felt. He hadn't known her name. He never expected to see her again. Back in her suite, Claire lay awake with the city blinking beneath her. She didn't expect him to rush in with gratitude or sweeping declarations. That wasn't what she was here for. She just wanted him to know it mattered. That the man who gave, without asking, who sat in silent solidarity while her world fell apart, he had saved her. And now, if fate allowed, she wanted the chance to return the favor. Not out of obligation, but out of the quiet, profound truth that sometimes the people who once held your broken pieces eventually deserve someone to hold theirs. Tomorrow she would see him again, not as the girl from the past, but as the woman who had finally found the man who once saw her before she knew how to see herself. The lobby was quiet the next morning, sunlight filtering through the high windows like warm honey. The hustle hadn't yet begun, no guests in line, no ringing phones, just the low hum of city life beginning to stir. Ethan stood near the front desk, organizing a clipboard, trying and failing not to glance toward the elevator. She hadn't come down yet. He told himself he wasn't waiting, that the business card she left yesterday was just an echo of a forgotten moment. But truth had a way of sitting in your chest like weight, heavy, unrelenting. The memory was surfacing now whether he wanted it to or not. That hospital hallway, the blue-tinged lighting, the antiseptic chill, his hands trembling after hours of pacing, of praying. His wife, Samantha, was in labor. Complications. Premature. He'd gone to the hallway to breathe, to not fall apart. And there she was. A young woman, folded in on herself at the end of a bench face buried in her hands, shoulders shuddering with the kind of grief no one can fake. Something in him had known instantly that her world had just shattered. He hadn't known what to say. So he didn't say anything. He sat beside her, offered his coat, offered silence. And when her sobs threatened to tear her apart, he gently reached out and held her hand. No names, no words, just warmth. Ethan didn't hear the elevator ding behind him until Liam came running from the side hallway. "Miss Claire," the boy shouted. Ethan turned. She stood there in a simple ivory sweater and dark jeans, her hair pulled back casually, but her presence still lit up the room. She knelt smiling and opened her arms. "You remember me then," she teased. "I remember you," Liam said proudly, hugging her. "Dad says I forget stuff, but I remember the important things." Claire looked up just briefly and met Ethan's eyes. He was already watching. They met again at lunch. Not by plan, but by something quieter, something organic. Claire had taken her laptop to the Courtyard Cafe, a quiet space tucked behind the hotel with potted trees and wrought iron tables. She hadn't worked at all. Her screen remained dark while her mind wandered. She didn't notice Ethan until he placed a glass of water on her table. She looked up. "Is this room service?" "No," he said. "Just thought you might need one." Her smile was slow, genuine. "Thank you." He sat across from her, an unspoken invitation she didn't question. For a moment, neither spoke. The rustling leaves and distant horns of New York filled the space between them. Then Ethan cleared his throat. "I remember you." Claire looked up, startled, not because she doubted he would, but because hearing it aloud felt like a key turning in a long-locked door. It was the maternity floor, he continued. "I was waiting outside the NICU. My wife, Samantha, was inside. We'd lost a baby before. This one was early, too. I went out to breathe and saw you on that bench." Claire's eyes shimmered. My mother had just died. Stage 4. It happened so fast. I didn't even have time to process it. "You looked so small," Ethan said quietly. "I didn't know what to do." "You did exactly what I needed," she said. "You stayed." No one else did. He looked down at his hands. I didn't even remember your face. Until yesterday. You weren't meant to, Claire replied, but I remembered everything. A breeze lifted the edges of her napkin, and for a second neither of them moved, just let the silence wrap around them like the night they once shared, wordless but not empty. I searched for you, she added. Years later. Not obsessively, just hoping one day I'd run into the man who reminded me I wasn't invisible. Ethan shook his head gently. I wasn't trying to do anything heroic. I know, she whispered. That's why it was. Later that day, Claire found herself walking through the hotel's quiet halls, a strange energy in her chest like something was blooming after years of lying dormant. She hadn't meant to stay this long, hadn't planned on getting involved. But Ethan was more than a moment from her past. He was proof that kindness wasn't a myth, that strength could come quietly. In the hallway, she passed Liam again. He was kneeling on the floor, coloring. Hey, kiddo, she said, crouching beside him. What are you drawing? He held it up proudly. A stick figure family, 3 people holding hands, a house, a dog, a sun with too many rays. That's me and Dad, he said, and that's you. Claire blinked. You drew me. You're happy in it, he said, 'cause we let you stay. She bit her lip. I haven't asked if I'm allowed to stay. Liam tilted his head. Do you want to? Her answer caught in her throat. I'm starting to. That night, back in his modest apartment, Ethan sat in the quiet after Liam had gone to bed. He held the business card she'd given him in one hand, his thumb tracing the handwritten message. You didn't speak that night, but you stayed. He stared at the sentence for a long time, then stood, walked to the shelf in the hallway, pulled out an old photo box, and for the first time in 7 years, he opened it. Inside were faded ultrasound photos, hospital bracelets, a yellowed page from a parenting magazine with a circled article about sleep schedules, and at the bottom, a frayed coat. His old hoodie, the one he'd given her. He'd forgotten he still had it. Ethan held it in his hands and exhaled slowly. There were moments in life that didn't ask for recognition. They asked to be remembered. And for the first time, he wasn't afraid of what would come next. He was curious, hopeful. Maybe it wasn't too late to let someone stay. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the air still carried that earthy scent of streets washed clean, like the world was offering a second chance. Ethan stood at the breakfast bar in his kitchen flipping pancakes for Liam, trying not to overthink what today might bring. But his hands betrayed him. He burned the first one and undercooked the second. Liam sat at the table legs, swinging back and forth, eyes fixed on his sketch pad. Miss Claire likes strawberries, he said suddenly, as if it were part of some ongoing conversation. Ethan looked over his shoulder. Does she? She picked them off her muffin and saved them for last. That means they're her favorite. That's what my teacher says. Ethan smiled in spite of himself. You're observant. Liam grinned. I get it from you. He flipped the next pancake more carefully, but his chest felt tight. Yesterday had shifted something inside him and he wasn't sure what to do with it. Claire stood by the lobby fountain, tapping something into her phone before tucking it away. She wore a soft camel coat, hair loose today, her expression focused but not closed. She seemed less like a CEO and more like someone deciding to be present. When Ethan approached her with Liam trailing behind, Claire looked up, and her smile was immediate warm. You two are becoming a habit, she said. Liam beamed. We brought you something. He held out a small to-go box wrapped with a red napkin. Inside, 2 pancakes shaped like stars topped with fresh-cut strawberries. Claire laughed genuinely. Are these? My dad made them, Liam said proudly. I only helped with the taste testing. Claire glanced at Ethan, who shrugged, figured it was safer than burnt toast. They shared a quiet laugh, and for a moment it felt normal, effortless. That afternoon, Claire took Liam for a walk through the Central Park Conservatory garden. The hotel staff had offered a babysitter, but Liam had asked for Claire. He didn't want to see the new Spider-Man exhibit. He wanted to hang out with the lady who listens. Claire had blinked when Ethan told her, then simply said, "I'd be honored." Ethan had almost said no. Almost. He didn't know why he'd agreed, maybe because Liam seemed happier lately, or maybe because something in Claire's presence felt steady, unthreatening, familiar in a way Ethan hadn't known he was craving. But as he watched them leave, Claire holding Liam's hand, letting him set the pace, he felt an ache he didn't expect. Not jealousy. Fear. Fear that he was letting something in. Again. Alone in the apartment that afternoon, Ethan found himself standing in Liam's room. It was a modest space bunk bed, posters of planets and dinosaurs, a bookshelf with more bedtime stories than any child would ever need. He touched a framed photo on the shelf. Samantha smiling in the hospital bed, Liam wrapped like a burrito in her arms. She had looked so strong that day, even after 20 hours of labor. And then, 12 days later, she was gone. A blood clot. A nurse said the word embolism like it wasn't supposed to shatter a life. Ethan had folded in on himself after that, gone into survival mode. The man who had once dreamed of building homes now worked fixing pipes and patching drywall. He didn't chase dreams, he clung to stability because hope was what made people bleed. He hadn't let anyone in. Not really. But Claire. Claire was different. She didn't push. She noticed. And somehow that was harder to resist than anything loud or dramatic. Meanwhile, in the garden, Liam was giving Claire a guided tour as if he were the appointed ambassador of Central Park. He pointed out every duck, every oddly shaped tree branch, every flower whose name he had half remembered. Claire listened, nodded, asked questions not out of politeness but with true interest. "Are you going to stay forever?" Liam asked suddenly as they reached a bench. Claire paused. "Forever is a long time." Liam squinted. "I don't like when grown-ups say that. They always mean no." She studied his face. "Would it be so bad if I stayed?" Liam shrugged. "Not to me. But Dad doesn't let people stay." "Why do you think that is?" He thought about it, picking at a blade of grass. "Maybe he's afraid they'll leave anyway." Claire's throat tightened. "Are you going to leave?" he asked, not accusing, just curious. "I don't want to," she said honestly. Liam gave her a slow, satisfied nod. "Okay, then I'll keep your seat saved." He patted the bench beside him. That night, Ethan opened the door to find Claire standing outside his apartment. She wore no makeup, no armor, just a soft expression and a paper bag in hand. "I brought soup," she said. He blinked. "Soup. You looked like someone who hasn't had dinner that wasn't beige in a long time." He chuckled, despite himself, and stepped aside. Inside, Claire set the bag on the table and unpacked 2 containers of homemade minestrone she'd had the hotel chef whip up as a favor. "You didn't have to," I know she interrupted. "I wanted to." They ate quietly. Liam told her about his science project and made her laugh with impressions of his teacher. But later, after Liam had gone to bed, the silence between Ethan and Claire changed. Deeper, more exposed. Claire sipped her tea. "Why did you let me stay?" He didn't answer right away. "Then, because I didn't realize how lonely I was, until I wasn't." Claire looked at him soft-eyed. "You don't have to fix everything, Ethan." He exhaled. "I've built my whole life around fixing things." She reached across the table, gently placing her hand on his. "Maybe it's time someone held you together for a while." He didn't speak, but he didn't pull away either. Outside, the city buzzed with the quiet pulse of a million lives moving on with or without you. Inside, for the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel like he was bracing for something to break. He just felt still. And maybe ready. The city was alive with the soft hum of early evening traffic, slowing windows, glowing autumn leaves, stirring in sidewalk gusts. Inside, room 1407, Claire sat at the small desk by the window. Her fingers paused above her keyboard. The cursor blinked on the empty email draft. She had intended to send a check-in note to her board of directors, just something simple to justify her extended stay. But her hands wouldn't move. What would she even say? I came for a site visit and found the man who once held my hand in a hospital hallway 15 years ago. And now I don't know how to leave. Instead, she closed the laptop gently and stood. The reflection in the window looked back at her, not the CEO in polished heels and precision plans, but the woman who longed for something she'd never written into any 5-year strategy. A woman who for the first time in a long time didn't feel so tired of being strong. Downstairs in the hotel staff room, Ethan was watching Liam try to balance a muffin on his forehead while reciting the names of all the planets in reverse order. Neptune, Uranus, Saturn. Wait, no, I skipped Jupiter. The muffin toppled to the floor with a dramatic thud. Ethan laughed. I'm impressed by the ambition, kid. Liam wiped his forehead and shrugged. Miss Claire bet me I couldn't do it. Ethan raised an eyebrow. She bet you muffins, mini muffins, Liam corrected. She's a smart negotiator. Ethan smiled to himself, shaking his head. That woman had a way of slipping into their lives like she belonged there. And strangely, it didn't feel like an intrusion. It felt like oxygen. Later that day, Claire joined Ethan and Liam in the hotel's rooftop garden, a quiet, underused terrace with a view of the city that shimmered like a secret only a few were allowed to see. Liam ran ahead, chasing invisible dragons, while Ethan and Claire walked side by side along the stone path between potted lavender and tiny olive trees. Claire broke the silence first. I've decided to stay a few more days. Ethan nodded slowly. Everything all right with your schedule? I cleared it, she said, hands tucked into the pockets of her coat. Apparently the company won't collapse without me for another 48 hours. He gave a short laugh. Sounds like good leadership. She glanced at him. Sounds like avoidance. He looked over at her more serious now, avoiding what her gaze was steady, leaving. Ethan stopped walking. Claire, I'm not asking you for anything, she said quickly, her voice soft but steady. I just want to be where I feel seen, and for some reason here with you and Liam, I do. He didn't answer right away. He looked out over the city. So many lights, so many lives, and somehow hers had crossed back into his. I've spent years trying to make life small enough to control, he said at last. Schedules, routines, repairs. If something breaks, I know how to fix it. But you... Claire's brows lifted gently. Me. You're not something I know how to fix, he admitted. And that scares me. She stepped closer. I'm not asking you to fix me either. A long silence passed between them. Not heavy, just honest. Then Ethan looked down at her. Liam told me you're the lady who listens. Claire laughed softly. He said that, yeah. He also said he wants to keep your seat saved, just in case you stay. Claire's throat tightened. And you? He hesitated. Then quietly, I haven't thought about what I want in a long time. That night, Claire found herself sitting in the hotel cafe with Liam while Ethan wrapped up a plumbing emergency in one of the guest suites. Liam was busy drawing on a napkin with a borrowed pen tongue poking out of the corner of his mouth in concentration. What are you working on? She asked. A map, he said. To the best day ever. Claire leaned in. What's on it? Breakfast with Dad. Garden dragons. You. And pancakes. She smiled. That does sound like a pretty good day. He paused, then looked up at her with an expression far wiser than his age should have allowed. My dad's really brave, you know, he said. But he gets scared too. He just doesn't say it out loud. Claire swallowed. What do you think he's afraid of? Liam shrugged. I don't know. But sometimes I think it's the same stuff I'm afraid of, like someone saying goodbye without warning. Claire blinked. The weight of that landed deep. I'm not planning to say goodbye, she whispered. Good, Liam said, returning to his napkin, 'cause I haven't drawn the way out yet. Later that evening, Ethan knocked on Claire's door. She opened it slowly, a little surprised. He looked conflicted. "I don't usually do this," he began. Claire waited, but I didn't want the day to end without saying something. She tilted her head. "What is it?" He shifted his weight. "I'm not good at letting people in. I don't know how to do that and still keep Liam safe. Or myself." Claire's voice was calm. "That's okay. I just thought you should know." He said, glancing at the floor, that I haven't let anyone get this close in years. She stepped forward. And yet, here I am. He looked up, met her eyes. "Yeah," he said. "Here you are." She didn't touch him, didn't kiss him, just stood there quietly present. And somehow, in that stillness, something opened. Not all the way, but just enough. Enough to let the possibility in. Enough to make staying feel less like a risk, and more like the beginning of something finally worth hoping for. The day began with light spilling into the city like forgiveness. Central Park glistened with dew, and the streets, still damp from the night's drizzle, shimmered under early sunlight. Claire stood in front of her mirror, hands paused over her earrings. Her reflection looked calm. But inside, something trembled. Today was Liam's birthday. She hadn't planned to be here for it. She hadn't planned to still be in this hotel. But somehow, over the past week, the days had softened around Ethan and Liam like petals folding inward. And she wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. She had an idea. A simple one, but from the heart. A surprise. At the hotel, Ethan had just finished fixing a jammed door on the 11th floor when he noticed the time. 1:07 p.m. Liam should have been back from school by now. He headed to the front desk expecting to see his son waiting with a snack or doodling in the corner like always. But Liam wasn't there. "Hey, have you seen my son Ethan?" asked the concierge. The woman looked up. "Liam. Oh, I thought Claire had picked him up today. She said it was prearranged." Ethan's heart dropped. "She what?" "She said you two planned something for his birthday." He didn't hear the rest. The world around him blurred as adrenaline surged through his chest. He pulled out his phone and called Claire. No answer. Again. Voicemail. By the third ring, panic tightened its grip. He bolted for the staff elevator. Claire and Liam were walking through the Met Museum's Temple of Dender exhibit hand in hand. Claire had arranged for a small private guide to show Liam around the Egyptian artifacts, and the boy was bouncing with excitement. "This is awesome," Liam said, eyes wide. "Dad's gonna freak when he hears I saw a real mummy." Claire grinned, but worry crept at the edge of her thoughts. She had texted Ethan earlier, told him about the plan. Maybe she should have double-checked. Maybe her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. 6 missed calls, 3 voicemails, all from Ethan. Before she could press play, the phone rang again. She answered. Ethan. "Where is he?" His voice was razor-sharp. Raw. "Liam. He's with me. Well, you took him. Without telling me. Are you out of your mind?" Claire stopped walking. Liam paused beside her, sensing something shift. "I left you a message." "I thought you thought what Claire, that it's okay to take someone's kid without clear permission, that it's your place to make that call." Her voice lowered. "I just wanted to make his birthday special. I didn't mean to. Don't bring him back to the hotel. Meet me at the cafe on 72nd and Columbus. Now." Then the line went dead. The cafe was almost empty when Claire arrived with Liam. Ethan was already there, pacing near the window, jaw, tight arms folded. Claire gently nudged Liam toward the counter. "Go pick out something. I'll be there in a minute." Liam nodded slowly and stepped away. Claire turned to Ethan. "Ethan, I swear I thought I was doing something kind. I wasn't trying to overstep." "You did overstep," he snapped. "He's my son. You don't get to decide what's good for him without asking me." "I tried. I left messages. I thought you saw." "You thought. That's the problem." His voice cracked then, just slightly. Claire's expression softened. "I'm sorry." He looked at her eyes filled with something deeper than anger. Hurt. Fear. "You don't get it," he said. "You show up and suddenly Liam's drawing pictures with you in them. He asks if you'll be at Thanksgiving. You bake muffins and make birthday plans and laugh like you belong, but you don't." "Not really." Claire's breath hitched. "You think I don't understand loss?" she asked, voice trembling. "You think I don't know what it means to let someone matter and then lose them without warning?" Ethan looked away, fists clenched. "I'm not going to leave him," she whispered. "Or you." "You will," he said more quietly now. "Eventually. People like you. You always leave. And Liam, he doesn't know how to recover from that. And I'm not sure I do either." Silence sat between them, thick as winter fog. Claire stepped forward. "Ethan," she said gently, "I don't want to fix anything. I just want to be here. But you're holding your whole life like it's made of glass waiting for the next shatter. I'm not the one breaking it." He closed his eyes. Tears pressed behind them but didn't fall. Maybe he murmured, "I just don't know how to let someone stay." Claire reached into her bag and handed him a small envelope. Inside was a folded paper. Liam's drawing from the other night. The one with the sun, the house, and 3 people holding hands. "I didn't ask for this," she said. "But I'd be lying if I said I didn't want it." She glanced toward the counter where Liam was still picking between 2 pastries, totally unaware of the emotional wreckage a few feet away. "I'll go if you want me to," Claire said. "I'll pack up tonight. But I needed you to know I wasn't playing a part. I wasn't trying to win anything." She paused. "I just wanted to belong somewhere again." Then she turned and walked to Liam. They left the cafe quietly. And Ethan, who had spent years mastering the art of holding everything together, felt something in him collapse. Not like a building, but like a dam. And the water behind it had a name. Claire. The hotel suite was unnaturally quiet that evening. Claire stood in the center of room 1407, her suitcase open on the bed, half filled, half abandoned. A folded blue sweater rested on top one she'd worn the day Liam spilled cocoa on her sleeve and laughed so hard he almost cried. She traced its sleeve with her fingers, then closed her eyes. How quickly something could start to feel like home. She moved slowly, methodically, placing books in a neat stack, zipping up toiletries, folding the photo Liam had drawn and tucked into her purse pocket. He had called it Our Team. Stick figures in front of a house with their names in blocky letters, Liam, Dad, Claire. The sun smiled in the corner. Her chest tightened. She'd promised herself she would never get attached without permission. And yet she had. Quietly, irrevocably, completely. She took a seat at the writing desk by the window and pulled a hotel notepad toward her. The pen hovered above the page. Then it moved. Ethan. I never expected to find you. I didn't come here searching for anything except closure. For years I've remembered that night in the hospital, the worst night of my life, and how somehow the presence of a stranger kept me from falling apart. You didn't ask my name. You didn't offer cliches or try to fix what was broken. You just stayed, and that changed everything. I wanted to tell you thank you. I thought that's all it would be. But then I met Liam, and I saw your life, your quiet strength, the way you protect what you love with every ounce of yourself. And I realized that the man who once saved a stranger with silence had spent years saving his own son with the same gentle, invisible grace. And I fell for both of you. Not in some sweeping romantic way, not like the stories we see in movies, but in the real, deep, terrifying way people do when they realize they've found something too good to ask for. I didn't mean to take Liam without asking. I truly thought you'd seen the message. But more than that, I made the mistake of believing I belonged in your world without asking you first. I'm sorry for that, but I'm not sorry for caring. I'm not sorry for hoping. You said you don't know how to let someone stay. So I'll go, but I'm leaving you this not to change your mind, not to guilt you into chasing after me, but so you know what you gave me. You made me feel visible. You made me feel safe again. And if there's even a part of you that wants to find me not out of obligation, but because your heart is ready, then you'll know where to look. Until then, I'll keep the door open. Claire. She folded the note and tucked it beneath the ceramic mug on the kitchen counter. No signature, no drama, just truth. And then she pulled the zipper on her suitcase shut. As she turned off the lights and softly closed the door behind her, something in her chest ached, not like a bruise but like something newly unwrapped. A love not rejected, just not ready yet. Ethan didn't find the note until well past midnight. The hotel had quieted. Liam was already asleep, one arm draped over the side of the bed, clutching a half-crumpled drawing. Ethan had returned to room 1407, half expecting, half hoping to find her still there. But the room was empty. The air still held the faint trace of her perfume, warm, clean, like vanilla and quiet courage. He stood in the middle of the suite, motionless. Then he saw it, the mug on the counter, the corner of the note peeking out beneath it. He didn't rush. He walked to it as if it might disappear if he moved too fast. When he read the letter, his knees nearly buckled. He leaned against the counter, gripping the paper like it might anchor him. Every word hit something raw. Not because it begged, but because it didn't. Because she'd walked away with grace, not accusation. She'd loved with openness and accepted the silence that came back. And she'd left him the one thing he hadn't known he was missing. A choice. He sat on the edge of Liam's bed for a long time, watching his son breathe. Liam stirred one eye, fluttering open. Dad Ethan whispered, "Yeah, buddy, I'm here. Miss Claire, go home." Ethan hesitated. "Yeah, she did." Liam's voice was quiet. "Did you make her leave?" Ethan stared at the shadowed ceiling. "No," he said eventually. "I think I made her feel like she had to." Liam blinked up at him. "Why?" Ethan swallowed. "Because I was afraid. Of what? A pause. Of needing someone I couldn't keep." Liam shifted under the covers. "If you're scared, I'll hold your hand." Ethan closed his eyes. It was the same phrase he had once said to a frightened stranger on a hospital bench. The same one Claire had never forgotten. The same one Liam now offered back to him. He opened his eyes and looked at his son. "I think I need that," he said. Liam smiled sleepily and reached out his small fingers, wrapping around Ethan's. And in that fragile, perfect moment, something inside Ethan cracked open, not in pain this time, but in release. He didn't know what he would do yet. But he knew one thing. He wasn't going to let the best thing he'd found slip away in silence. Not again. Not this time. Morning broke slowly. It wasn't the kind of sunrise that demanded attention. It was soft, unassuming, the kind that crept through the blinds without asking and warmed the space between father and son like a quiet promise. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, Claire's letter spread before him. He'd read it again just before making Liam's breakfast. Then again while the toast cooled, and now again after Liam had gone to brush his teeth. There were no flourishes in her words. No grand confessions. Just grace wrapped in stillness. He didn't know people could love like that without needing to be chosen back, without demanding proof. He'd been so focused on protecting Liam from abandonment that he hadn't realized he'd built a wall high enough to keep love from ever getting in. And now he had no idea how to lower it without breaking everything he'd spent years holding upright. But Liam's words from the night before still echoed in his head like a thread of light. "If you're scared, I'll hold your hand." He turned the phrase over again and again. Because that was what Claire had done, wasn't it? She had held his hand in spirit in silence, and then, finally, in truth. And now it was his turn. After walking Liam to school, Ethan didn't go back to work right away. He called out of his shift and instead walked the long way through the city, retracing memories he hadn't meant to hold on to. The hospital. The bench where Claire had sat 15 years ago. He found it still there, paint-chipped but whole. He sat. Back then he'd sat here because he had no words. Today he sat here because there were too many. And for the first time he let them rise. The helplessness of watching his wife die. The terror of holding a newborn with no idea how to raise him. The years of pushing through, fixing, controlling, surviving, but never really living. And then Claire had appeared. Not to save him, but to see him. Not to demand anything, but to remind him that he too was allowed to want something more. He sat on that bench until his heart steadied, and then he stood, and he ran. Claire was seated near a window in the Delta Sky Club at JFK, hands wrapped around a cup of mint tea, watching the tarmac blink and bustle in the distance. Her flight to London boarded in 40 minutes. The noise around her blurred luggage wheels murmured conversations, the clink of silverware. None of it reached her. She hadn't cried, not when she'd left the hotel, not when the cab turned the corner, not when the gate agent printed her boarding pass. She told herself she was proud of how she'd left things dignified with love intact, but sitting here now with no one beside her, she felt hollow, the kind of hollow you only feel when you've tasted something real, and lost it. She looked down at her phone. No messages, no missed calls, no miracle last-minute arrivals. She'd told herself she didn't expect one, but still she hoped. Back in Manhattan, Ethan burst through the school's front office at 10:42 a.m., drawing looks from the receptionist and a few teachers. "I need to see Liam," he said, slightly out of breath. The woman blinked. "Is something wrong?" "No," he said. "Something's right. I need to tell him something." Within minutes, Liam appeared, lunchbox swinging at his side. "Dad," he asked, confused. "Did I forget something?" Ethan knelt in front of him, heart-pounding. "No, buddy. I forgot something." Liam tilted his head. "I forgot to say thank you," Ethan said, his voice catching. "Last night you said something to me, about holding my hand." "I meant it," Liam whispered, suddenly shy. "I know," Ethan said, smiling. "And because of you, I think I'm ready. Ready for what." Ethan stood, his hand resting lightly on his son's shoulder. "To find her." Liam's eyes lit up. "Miss Claire." Ethan nodded. "Yeah." "Miss Claire." Liam didn't hesitate. "Let's go." The cab hit traffic 3 blocks from the airport. Ethan glanced at the time, 10:58. Claire's flight boarded at 11:15. Liam kept bouncing beside him, peeking out the window like he could somehow will the cars to part. "She always waits at the window," he said suddenly, "when she's nervous." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "She told me," Liam said proudly. "She doesn't like being early to gates, but she likes to see the plane." Ethan laughed. "You really do listen." "I get it from you," Liam said, and it nearly undid Ethan. They sprinted through Terminal 4, dodging rolling luggage and startled travelers. At the top of the escalator near Gate 22, Ethan spotted her. Claire, hair tucked behind one ear, a book open on her lap, unread, staring out at the runway. His heart hammered. Claire. She turned, saw them. For a second her face was unreadable, and then she stood. Ethan didn't slow as he approached. His voice was raw, breathless. "You said if I wanted to find you?" Her eyes shone. "I meant it." He stepped closer. "I was scared." "I know," she said gently. "So was I." He reached into his coat pocket and held up the folded drawing Liam had made, the one with all 3 of them, hand in hand under a crooked sun. "I've spent years afraid of letting someone stay," he said. "But you already did. And now, I want to stay with you." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't want to fix anything," he added. "I just want to build something. Together." Claire didn't speak. She just stepped forward, took his hand, and placed it over her heart. Liam stood beside them, wide-eyed and beaming. A quiet family. Imperfect, unexpected, but whole. And somewhere a plane rolled past the window. Forgotten. They didn't take the flight. Claire canceled it quietly with a single look toward the agent at the gate. No fanfare. No rebooking. Just the quiet surrender of a plan that no longer made sense. She had spent years living by itinerary, strategic timelines, investor calls, international hotel suites, but this This moment at Gate 22 with 2 sets of hands folded into hers was the only appointment that had ever really mattered. Back in the cab, Liam sat between them, knees bouncing. "I thought we'd have to run faster," he said seriously, "like in the movies." Claire smiled. "You mean we didn't look cool enough? You looked like you were about to faint," he told his dad. Ethan laughed, an unguarded open laugh that filled the quiet space around them. Claire turned her face slightly toward the window, blinking hard. Not because she was sad, but because something in her chest, long frozen, was starting to thaw. When they arrived at Ethan's apartment, Claire hesitated outside the door. She'd been here once, but now it felt different. More real. Less borrowed. Like she had earned the right to step inside, but only if she still wanted to. Ethan caught her pause. "You okay?" Claire nodded, then looked up at him. "I don't want to force my way in." "You're not," he said softly. "You're being asked in." She looked at Liam, who grinned and whispered, "We saved your spot." That did it. She stepped inside. The apartment was simple, but lived in, not picture perfect. A stack of clean laundry waited to be folded. Liam's toys were tucked into corners in soft rebellion against tidiness. There were family photos on the wall, Ethan with a much younger Liam, his late wife smiling from an old picture frame, sunlight caught in her curls. Claire took a slow breath. She wasn't replacing anyone. She wasn't erasing anything. She was being invited into something already good, just ready for more. Ethan brought her tea and sat beside her on the worn couch. The silence between them was no longer awkward, it was full, soft, heavy in a beautiful way. "You know," he said, after a long pause, "I always thought I was protecting Liam from pain by keeping people out." Claire turned toward him. "But the truth is," he continued, "I was protecting myself. From hope. From the kind of hope that doesn't come with guarantees." "I know that kind," Claire said quietly. "It's the kind that's only real when it's not promised." They looked at each other. No more explaining. Just truth. Quiet and mutual. "I missed you the second you left," Ethan admitted. "And I didn't even know I had the right to miss you." Claire smiled. "You didn't need permission." That night, Liam insisted they all bake something together. Claire offered suggestions, banana bread sugar cookies, but Liam had already decided. "Upside-down pineapple cake," he announced. Ethan blinked. "We've never made that. I saw it on TV. It looks happy." So they tried. They spilled flour, burned the first attempt, laughed so hard that Claire had to sit down at one point, tears of joy streaking her cheeks. Ethan stood at the stove with his arm around her shoulders as she wiped her eyes. Liam decorated the second cake with pineapple slices that looked like lopsided suns. "It's kind of perfect," he declared. Claire took a picture of the three of them holding the cake, Liam in the middle, beaming. It wasn't glossy, it wasn't curated, but it was real. And in that photo there was no emptiness, no missing piece, just wholeness. Later, when Liam had fallen asleep on the couch, Ethan carried him gently to bed. Claire followed, pausing at the door as Ethan tucked the blanket around his son's shoulders and kissed his forehead. He turned to find Claire watching. "He's lucky," she whispered. Ethan smiled. "I think I'm the lucky one." They returned to the living room. The apartment felt warm, more like a home than any place Claire had lived in years. She stood by the window, gazing out at the night. "I used to believe healing looked like forgetting," she said softly. "That to move forward you had to leave everything behind." Ethan joined her, their shoulders nearly touching. "And now?" he asked. She turned, eyes gleaming. "Now, I think healing looks like this. Letting what hurt you shape you, but not close you." Ethan reached for her hand. This time she didn't hesitate. "I'm still scared," he admitted. "So am I. But I think I want to be scared with you." Her smile was small but radiant. "Then that makes two of us who are finally brave." He leaned in, slow, careful. Their foreheads touched, a breath shared, And in the quiet of that night, without declarations or fireworks, something sacred unfolded. Not the beginning of love, but the return to it. In another room, Liam stirred in his sleep, unaware that just down the hall his world had quietly rearranged itself into something even better. Not perfect, but true, and for the first time in a long time, the air between all three of them felt like it was finally full of promise. 3 months later, the wind had turned cold again in Manhattan, curling through the streets with the sharp promise of winter. But inside the small apartment above 86th Street, warmth danced in the air, laughter the smell of cinnamon, the soft rustling of paper-wrapped presents being sneakily hidden in closets Liam wasn't supposed to open. The holidays were coming. Claire stood by the kitchen counter wearing one of Ethan's flannel shirts over leggings, her hair tied in a loose knot as she carefully placed handwritten tags on gifts. She didn't rush. She liked this part, the quiet, choosing the deliberate gesture. Nothing bought in a panic. Nothing hollow. In the living room, Liam was sprawled out with construction paper and markers working on a card for his Christmas homework hero, a new title he'd invented for Claire just that morning. Ethan entered from the hallway, rubbing his hands together to fight the chill. He watched them for a moment, unnoticed, the two people who had changed everything. "Okay," he said. "The tree lights are officially fixed." Again. Claire looked up and smiled. "I told you to stop letting Liam plug in every toy spaceship at once." Liam grinned. "They need backup power." Ethan shook his head in mock despair. "One day, you'll learn about energy bills." Claire crossed the kitchen and wrapped her arms around him. "Until then, we have backup love." He blinked. "That was corny. I stand by it." They both laughed, and for a moment time slowed. There had been 1,000 little moments like this over the past few months, cups of coffee shared before school drop-off dinners made side-by-side bedtime stories told by two voices instead of one. But none of it had been rushed or forced. It had been chosen, day by day, and that was what made it real. Later that night, snow began to fall. It started gently, just a few flurries tapping against the window before blooming into soft waves that blurred the edges of the city and made even the sirens sound distant. Claire and Ethan stood together by the window mugs of tea, warming their hands. "You know," she said, leaning into his shoulder, "I used to think love was supposed to be grand. Some big movie scene, a kiss in the rain, fireworks, applause." Ethan chuckled. "And now I think love is when someone remembers how you take your tea, or saves you the last bite of pie without saying anything, or watches the snowfall with you like it's the first time." He looked at her. "So, we're not getting applause." Claire shrugged. "We got Liam." "That's better." Across the room, Liam was curled up on the couch, head resting on a pillow, a book half-finished in his hands. He'd insisted on staying up to see the snow, but the warmth had gotten to him first. Ethan stepped forward, lifted his son gently into his arms, and carried him to bed. Claire followed, tucking the blankets over Liam's shoulders. As she leaned in to kiss his forehead, Liam stirred slightly. "You're staying right," he murmured. Claire looked at Ethan. Their eyes met, and in that glance was everything what they had feared, what they had fought, and what they had finally found. "I'm staying," Claire whispered. Liam's lips curled into a sleepy smile before he drifted back under. Back in the living room, Ethan lit a small candle on the windowsill. It had become their ritual. One light every night, like a quiet way of saying, "We're here." Claire joined him, slipping her hand into his. "Do you ever wonder how different things would have been?" She asked if we hadn't met again that day at the airport. Ethan nodded. "All the time." "Do you regret anything?" He shook his head slowly. "No, because every scar, every wrong turn, every year I spent afraid, brought me right back to you." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You know," he added, "you still never explained what you were doing at JFK that day. You didn't have a reservation. You just showed up." Claire smiled. "I was supposed to be on a flight to London for a summit. But that morning, I woke up and couldn't go. I kept thinking about that night in the hospital. about how I never said thank you. I got in a car without a plan. I just needed to find you." Ethan looked at her for a long time. Then he said quietly, "Thank you for showing up." They stood there watching the snow coat the world in stillness. In the corner of the apartment next to the bookshelf was a framed picture, three people hand in hand beneath a crooked sun, drawn in crayon on faded paper. Beneath it, written in Liam's blocky handwriting, "Our family." The long way home. And above them, in tiny lettering, Claire had added, "One night love doesn't always arrive on time, but it always finds its way." Outside, the city kept moving. But inside that small apartment there was light. Not loud, not dazzling, but steady. Like the kind of light you leave on when someone you love is trying to find their way home,